The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn has used imaginative techniques and invocation techniques in their magical system that some have considered a novelty for the time. But were they, really? Is Golden Dawn magic ancient or modern? In this episode, we will explore the findings from a study that challenges this notion. Our journey begins with a critical examination of Alison Butler's influential thesis on the Golden Dawn. Butler posited that this late 19th century magical order brought forth novel practices within the Western esoteric tradition. Specifically, she argued for the innovative use of active visualization techniques and unmediated invocation methods. However, recent scholarship challenges this claim, suggesting that rather than breaking new ground, the Golden Dawn's practices were in continuity with much older magical traditions. In this episode, we will unpack these assertions by examining the vis imaginativa, the power of the imagination, and the methods of invoking spiritual entities as practiced by the Golden Dawn. Were these techniques truly avant-garde, or were they rooted in the long-standing magical practices of antique, medieval, and Renaissance Europe? Before we dive into today's discussion, I want to emphasize the importance of your support in allowing free education for all on topics in esotericism based on peer-reviewed scholarship. You keep this project alive by contributing through PayPal, Patreon, Ko-fi, or YouTube memberships. For details on how to support my work, please check out my website, drangelapuca.com, or check the links in bio, cards, info box, and pinned comment. Also, don't forget to sign up for my newsletter to get to know me better in an uncensored way and bypassing social media capricious algorithms. A huge thank you to everyone who makes academic esoteric literacy possible. Your contribution makes all the difference in the world. Now, let the symposium begin. Hello Symposiast, I'm Dr. Angela Puca, Religious Studies PhD, and this is your online resource for the academic study of magic, esotericism, paganism, shamanism, and all things occult. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and we're referring here to the order active from 1887 to 1903, developed a magical practice by integrating techniques and doctrines from various historical periods, including antiquity, the Middle Ages, and the Renaissance, into a unique system. Scholars have debated whether the Golden Dawn represented a modern transformation of Western esoteric practice. Alison Butler, in her works, argued that the Golden Dawn adapted historical practices through a Victorian perspective, resulting in a novel form of magic. This claim is supported by analyzing the Golden Dawn's practices through various frameworks, including cultural and social context, and comparing these with historical esoteric practices. Butler posited that the Golden Dawn introduced significant changes in the use of visualization and invocation methods, suggesting a morphological break from traditional practices. However, the source I'm presenting challenges Butler's assertion, proposing instead that the Golden Dawn's practices showed considerable continuity with those of their predecessors, rather than a radical departure. The analysis employs a homological diachronic method to compare the Golden Dawn's practices with those of earlier periods, focusing on the claimed innovations in visualization and invocation. Plaisance concludes that there is morphological similarity rather than novelty in the Golden Dawn's practices compared to historical ones. Now, let's premise that the term magic, as used by the Golden Dawn, encompasses a broad range of practices, which historically might have been distinguished by different terminologies like theurgy and sorcery. Anton Febvre identified the vis imaginativa, the imaginative faculty, as a specific element of the broader creative imagination, often associated with notions of divinity and human capacities as imaginative forces. Febvre emphasized the active role of imagination, which Alison Butler suggests is a modern characteristic. Butler contrasts these with the use of vis imaginativa in late antique theurgy, such as in Iamblichus practices, where it was more passive and receptive, controlled by divine will to produce visions and facilitate miraculous events. Butler argues that these changed with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, where the vis imaginativa was actively directed by the magician's will, independent of any divine control, to effect physical changes. However, historical analyses show that even in the Golden Dawn, while some practices aligned with Butler's views of active imagination directed at material outcomes, other practices continued to blend active and receptive uses of imagination, much like earlier traditions. Tanya Lerman notes that in modern magical practices, especially those emerging from the Golden Dawn's legacy, visualization is crucial as both a skill and as a technological means by which magic operates. This underscores the continuity of imaginative practices across historical and modern esoteric traditions, challenging the notion of a stark transition to modernity as suggested by Butler. In describing the mechanisms of materially oriented magic, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn's instructional documents, particularly the flying rolls, detail that imagining creates tangible forms on astral or higher planes, perceptible to beings to those planes. This underscores the belief in the objective existence of forms generated by the magician's will. William Wynne Westcott further clarifies that the imagination, when empowered by will, can manifest ideas externally. Florence Farr provides a practical method for using this will-directed imaginative magic that emphasizes the empowerment of imagination by individual will. Visualize one's head as a globe-like center from which radiate rays of thought. Strongly visualize the desired change. Concentrate the mental rays on this image until it feels like a glowing ball of compacted force, and project this force outwards onto the subject to be affected. This process illustrates the Golden Dawn's method of materializing desired effects through the imagination. However, the order also utilized the vis imaginativa in a dual capacity, both actively and passively. Westcott explains that extending perceptual powers to sense entities and forces on supersensuous planes is another key goal. This approach involves both an active start and a passive reception. Perform a banishing ritual. Visualize an object like a tarot card. Hold the image until the magician seems to see into it. This vision then unfolds as the magician enters a state of reverie. This method underscores the importance of a receptive use of the vis imaginativa, where the initial active use transitions into a state where the impression and visions are received, blending creative and receptive faculties in magical practice. The use of the vis imaginativa or imaginative faculty as both an active and receptive tool in magical practices was not confined to individual exercises within the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. William Butler Yeats, in his autobiographies, recounts an episode where MacGregor Mothers facilitated a vision for Yeats using the symbol of a titan, illustrating the dual nature of imaginative use in the order's magic. Yeats as the receptive and Mothers as the active participant. Historical references to this dual use of the imagination span from late classical Neoplatonism to the Middle Ages, indicating a long-standing tradition. Neoplatonic theurgists like Iamblichus and Proclus described the use of the imagination to perceive divine entities through the eyes of the soul, or within the luminous garment of the soul, which highlights a receptive mode of imagination. In contrast, Plotinus and texts like the Corpus Hermeticum offer examples where the imagination is first actively used to create an image, which then serves as a receptacle for divine visions or understanding. This pattern continues into the Middle Ages, with texts like the Liber Visionum of John of Morigny, which involves initial active visualization of sacred scenes followed by the passive reception of divine visions. These practices are noted across various medieval texts, categorized into structured, guided visualizations and more open, less guided forms. This range of practices highlights the imaginative faculty's pivotal role in both constructing and receiving mystical or magical experiences across different historical periods and esoteric traditions. During the Renaissance, Marsilio Ficino, a central figure in 15th century Neoplatonism, exemplified an active use of the vis imaginativa in esoteric practices. Ficino's techniques involved intense active visualization, often combined with physical stimuli, aimed at invoking planetary intelligences. His method included engaging all senses to align oneself with the solar spirit, suggesting a transformative process facilitated by the imaginative faculty. Similarly, Cornelius Agrippa and others during the Renaissance explored the power of the imagination to affect physical reality and bridge the natural with the celestial. Agrippa emphasized the vis imaginativa as a means to impact health and external events, indicating a belief in the proactive capacities of the imagination far beyond mere receptivity. Renaissance esotericism also incorporated the imaginative techniques seen in Ignatius of Loyola's spiritual exercises, which involved structured visualization techniques intended to foster profound religious experiences through active imagination. Furthermore, the Renaissance art of memory, particularly in the works of Giulio Camillo and Giordano Bruno, utilized the vis imaginativa to construct mental architectures that mirrored the universe, thereby facilitating a divine communion. This practice highlighted the ability of the imagination to actively create and passively receive divine influences, linking it to earlier practices seen in the Golden Dawn and ancient esoteric traditions. These examples from the Renaissance demonstrate the continued importance and dual functionality of the vis imaginativa, as both an active creator and a passive receptor within the broader context of Western esotericism. Alison Butler claims that the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn introduced novel invocatory techniques, specifically a two-party system that bypasses intermediaries, where the magician can directly reach out the divine beings, contrasting sharply with traditional esoteric practices where a third intermediary, such as an angel or demon, is typically involved. This assertion is examined by looking at both the Golden Dawn's practices and historical precedents. The Golden Dawn's methods, heavily influenced by the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abraham Lane the Mage, supposedly focus on direct communication between the magician and a divine entity, such as a guardian angel. Butler suggests this represents a break from past practices, which relied on intermediaries. However, evidence from the Order's rituals indicates the use of both direct and intermediary-involved methods. For example, the Golden Dawn's vibration technique directly invokes divine names to draw powers into the practitioner. Yet, other rituals still utilize intermediaries, aligning more with traditional practices described in Solomonic grimoires. Historical analysis reveals that the concept of direct invocation without intermediaries is also not unique to the Golden Dawn, but is found throughout Western esoteric tradition. This includes the practices of Iamblichus and in texts such as the Greek magical papyri, which employ direct invocation techniques. The Renaissance also saw figures like Marsilio Ficino and Cornelius Agrippa using methods that allowed for direct communion with divine entities, sometimes bypassing intermediaries. Moreover, earlier medieval works like Liber Visionum and the Ars Notoria feature instances of direct invocation, demonstrating that the use of intermediaries was not uniformly applied across historical magical practices. This continuity of direct invocation methods across different eras challenges Butler's claim about the novelty of Golden Dawn's approaches, showing that the Order's practices were part of a long-standing esoteric tradition rather than a radical innovation. In conclusion, Plaisance challenges Butler's assertion that the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn introduced novel magical practices, specifically in their use of the vis imaginativa and unmediated invocation techniques. The findings he proposes demonstrate that the Golden Dawn employed a blend of active, passive, and active cum passive imaginative techniques, much like those found in pre-modern esoteric practices, thereby undermining the claim of morphological novelty. Similarly, the supposed innovation of intermediary-less invocations by the Golden Dawn does not hold up under scrutiny, as both the Order's practices and those of earlier times often included the use of intermediaries. This analysis suggests that while the Golden Dawn may have contributed to modern transformations in ritual magic, the fundamental techniques they used were not radically new, but deeply rooted in historical traditions. This continuity calls into question the supposed modernity of not only the Golden Dawn's practices, but also those of contemporary esoteric currents that trace their lineage to the Order. As such, modern magical practices, influenced significantly by the Golden Dawn, may be viewed as extensions of a long-standing tradition rather than breaks from the past, necessitating a re-evaluation of what we consider modern in the context of magical practice. This is it for today's video. If you watched until this point, leave me an old scroll emoji. Now, my dear symposiasts, this project of delivering free academic knowledge based on peer-reviewed scholarship can only exist thanks to your support. So if you have the means and want to offer this knowledge to all, please consider supporting my work with a one-off PayPal donation by joining memberships, my inner symposium on Patreon or Ko-fi, super thanking me in the comments, and checking out my services at drangelapuka.com. You can book a tutoring session, a private lecture, buy one of my courses or individual lectures, commission a video, and much more. All links are in a pinned comment, in the info box, in the bio, everywhere. Also, don't forget to sign up for my newsletter to get to know me better through all my personal ponderings and reflections over my journey in academia and sometimes outside of academia. So you find the link for that as well. If you like this video, don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, activate the notification bell so that you will never miss out on anything that I post or when I'm live, and let me know your thoughts about this episode in the comments. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope that you stay tuned for all the academic fun. Bye for now. Today we hold it,